Right. See you later. Wait. Hello, little fella. I'm on 26th. 26th of April. That's Sunday. 7 minutes to 3 in the afternoon, and it's breezy but sunny. Lots of birds out at the moment. I think they're starting to build nests, perhaps just under the roofs. That's frogs. It's a noisy afternoon. Well, just now there's a certain, can't say stillness because it's breezy, but there's one. No, there's an absence of the noise of cars. Although in saying that, what do I see down at the end of the road here? A white van. I'm going to do that. Be spontaneous. Not a big clear blue sky. Got lots of wonderful clouds over Lure. Which gives the hills a very nice look because you've got lots of sun and shade. Shadows. Flo was talking about, kind of, she was thinking, wow, is it going to be like this when we retire? That you get a lot of boredom. That was the gist of it. And I was trying to say that kind of is the conundrum, and in a sense it's to get to a place where you think, you know, I'm quite serene and I feel quite lucky and grateful, but I still feel like something's missing, because when you achieve something, a certain boredom can kind of set in. Not that there's anything wrong with that for a while, and different things always come about, but it's an interesting topic for discussion, but perhaps not with Flo. I find it an interesting thing, but I could sense Flo is just more irritated by the feeling of boredom, and a kind of maybe a looking first time at something which a person wouldn't really think about much, because the vast majority of people are either they don't have time for these kind of thoughts because their lives are difficult and they're trying to get by, and they don't have the luxury perhaps to just sit around and contemplate these kind of philosophical ideas. Maybe it's some other reason, but I couldn't go on with that discussion, and yet it's difficult to discuss it with myself because it's kind of new territory. But I intuitively feel that it's a very interesting point. It goes back a bit to Schopenhauer. What does one do when they get everything that's supposed to make them happy, or let's say they become happy and content and serene, and it may sound ungrateful, but it's not enough. It still leads to the kind of boredom and anxiety at some point. How does one keep reinventing oneself? How does one keep finding things to interest them? I suppose things just keep coming up. And it is, like I said before, it's an extremely lucky place to find yourself. A lot of people have got serious issues to deal with. Sure. Yeah, thinking of other people, trying to look after kids, or trying to deal with sick relatives. God, think of Martina, my own sister, and the life she has. I could feel almost guilty for being in a situation where I'm contemplating, what do you do when you have everything? Of course I don't. Joe? I have all the mood swings of the next person. I don't have everything, and I don't have serenity. Just had to look at me last night to see that. I felt quite almost ill in the computer room last night. It's actually the previous audio file here, I think. I felt kind of nauseous, but I wasn't sure whether it was nauseous in a mental state as well as a physical state. It's hard to explain. You just come to a place where nothing interests you for a while. And so, well, you just gotta wait. He waits. The man who can wait for the state to pass. the man who can wait with a smile on his face, because he knows that in the kind of fire of the burning of the irritation and the despair, there is something being forged. There is some new ground being found. A newer life form. Newer ideas. Or not ideas actually, much more than that. It's like a newer existence altogether. I've never contemplated life like that. It's when you get to a point where there's a realization that buying things doesn't cure anything, that having new projects is just really new distractions, and that's fine, that although there is always the hope of some real spiritual promotion, and if that is nothing more than a stronger, more honed psyche and a stronger ability to deal with things, then I certainly am having promotions all the time. Let's say we get rid of the notion of getting to a place where you're going to be going around in a state of some kind of higher state of ecstasy. Bonjour. Bon chien. I'm talking about things I can't quite. It's not a case that I can't put into words. I'm not even really grappling with them in a thinking way. They're complex, and sometimes I'm halfway through the thought about it and I think, well, that's not right. Or I think there's no way through. Yes, there is. I can sense the contradiction halfway through the thought of the thing. It's I don't know. It's, I guess, the point. I should put things that could be like this, or this is kind of the way I think about it at the moment, but that idea is obviously open to change over time. And it sometimes, I guess, to flow as well, I think sometimes it may sound terribly negative to say that what happens when you have all these serenity and stuff and you just end up still being bored, but in my mind it's not negative, it's more intriguing. It's more intriguing to kind of take apart a little bit some of the more simplistic notions about the human condition. You know, you do that, you finish work, you get your pension, and you pick up a hobby like gardening, and then, my friend, you shall live happily ever after. Those stupid fucking fairy tales. Because that's the whole point, the happy ever after. That's still... it's still something the vast majority of people, I would imagine, are looking for, and they think it's there and not that difficult to acquire, that to be in that situation happily ever after. All you need is a big house and lots of money in the bank, and you live happily ever after. All you need is to become extremely successful or gain power, and you live happily ever after. All you need is to be more spiritual, to be more studious, to be a better disciple, and you live happily ever after. And a lot of these voices that are all over the media are young voices. They're not people who can pick apart that sentence, happy ever after. They're not older people that can say, you know, you need to address, what's the phrase? The elephant in the room. You need to address some facts. Undeniable facts. They're not fake news. The fact of old age and decay. The fact of the ever-inquiring, the ever-unsatiable appetite of the mind. The question of the perhaps the ever-growing anxiety or fear as that mortality question can only come along more and more. These things, they're not addressed. And in a young person, I think that is absolutely the way it should be. I don't think a young person has the faculty to address these things. I don't think that they can possibly know about them. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
But yeah, a young person doesn't have the faculty and should really be staying away from these things. There's no place in a young person's mind for this kind of thought. Because that faculty isn't there, I think the synapses that you need, they don't come till you get older. But when the whole of a culture seems to be run, or at least aimed at, and run by, at least that, it's like the personality of the culture the spirit of the culture is a 22-year-old girl or a 22-year-old guy, and you end up having 70% of the human story just is not addressed. So you don't have a lot of 50-something-year-olds, at least I don't see them, getting past all that stuff, getting past all the mundane distractions, the capital, social, all of that stuff. I mean, all of the politics, all of the buying, all of the security. And in a sense, all of the religions to some extent, although religions at least grapple with this problem. In fact, you could say with some of them that's kind of all they do. The Christian religion, it's obsessed to an unhealthy point perhaps on the end, but the problem with them is that they simplify it into nonsense. I mean, stupefying nonsense. What happens when you die? I go to paradise. And does that thought keep you through thick and thin? Push comes to shove, does that thought really work every time for you? I don't necessarily have to worry about the next life either. I don't really. It's not a huge thing in my thinking. But I do think of the getting there. I'd be a damn fool if I said that I don't worry about it at all. I think everybody does. But just that transition and just if you like the biological fact, the material fact, that's one thing. But when you start to think about the bigger philosophical questions, what is existence? What is a person to do when the culture and the world around them doesn't work for them anymore, doesn't offer them a kind of temporary, a more full-term distraction from those other thoughts. Getting beyond the simple biology of it, you know. What should a person who has these thoughts, who is in this position, where there isn't a textbook, not that he can find anywhere, it's not like there isn't a blog to go to. There isn't a .co something to click onto. You could say that's plenty of midlife crisis stuff, and there is, but they're absolutely, well, I won't say, I don't know, but some of that stuff is a cliche-ridden bullshit. It's like people know there's something there, but the answers in some of these sites can be boiled down, or at least in their mind, to these stupid slogans, you know. Like, when you feel like this, you should just look at the flowers, or something, I don't know. can't think of any. It's the type of Facebook slogans that just torment me, because they simplify things to obscurity. Nietzsche is the only mind that I can go to, because he touched on it. He at least touched on it. At least he mentioned the great challenges of self-creation. That's such a bad dog. Sure. Self-creativity. He used some analogies and stuff which I can relate to anyway here. I'm also positive that there's many people in the cities and even in the towns that I could have a great conversation with. Many men my age and older and maybe even younger, who wouldn't find this kind of conversation that alien. I mean, it goes without saying that there must be many millions of people out there with the same psychic makeup as me. Many people my age who spent their whole lives following a similar path that I've done. Or am I being a little foolhardy in thinking that? Anyway, I'm sure there are many people out there who would love to have this conversation and who would not be surprised by it. There's lots of deep people. Maybe there's just certain things there isn't really any answers to. And the question is there some kind of a blueprint or is there a book out there somewhere which starts off at this level in terms of the problem or in terms of what you want to contemplate, and it goes from there? No padding, no kind of 60 pages of bullshit leading up to the question, but just a straight into it. We find ourselves at this position. What do we do from here? This is for people who have read this and that. Think about this and that. Bonjour. People who have read this and that. People who contemplate. A certain type of thinking. And it's the type of thinking and contemplating that does have its rewards. Looking at life and realizing that there is no real remedy to it, that there is no place of continual happy ever after, that it doesn't exist, that it will always be filled with ups and and downs, and that there will be times when the joy or the inspiration will be fantastic, phenomenal, greater than you've known before. But then unfortunately, more than likely, there is the flip to that as well. That perhaps the down, the sadness, the anxiety will also have kind of jumped in size. And so, when we look at life like this, that there is no happy ever after, there is no plateau of constantly feeling brilliant. And maybe Jordan, maybe one won't be so objectful to the ending of it. The Lazarus song from David Bowie comes to mind. I'll be free like the bluebird. I'll be free. And I listened to that and I thought a couple of years ago, but you're surely as free as anybody could be. You're David Bowie, you're kind of worshipped as a god on the earth. How free must you be? But during this time of confinement and watching all these superstars in their houses, and also it's kind of linked to my own getting older, there's kind of an undeniable realization that the success of the individual has nothing to do with how they feel. It's nothing to do with their life. It is obviously far better to be Paul McCartney in a mansion than a guy freezing to death on the sidewalk who's got no home and no money and is an alcoholic. But the guy on the sidewalk, the alcoholic, may actually be in better form than a person like Robin Williams who's probably just tortured in his mind. And not just his mind, it's kind of deeper than that. Tortured in your soul, you know. So this kind of thinking about these ideas, which may seem nonsense to a lot of people, maybe the vast majority, they're not exactly spiritual, although spirituality comes into it, because I always hold a space and I hold out a place on all of this for magic, for serendipity, coincidence, what Jung talked about, for magic moments, unexplicable things. Sometimes it can be an unexplicable wave of just total joy that comes, or an unexplicable wave of power that can't really be explained. So I'm always okay with that. I'm not looking at the world in an atheist way or anything, or in a, 1 and 1 is 2 scientific, pragmatic, no nonsense way. No, I'm not. Because the rationalist mind is very bleak. No, but it's just a thought that you get to a point and it's going to always be a kind of struggle, mentally, one way or another. Then perhaps, when the end is in sight, having a philosophy like that may make one, give one some kind of peace in that knowledge, or it may calm the anxiety, and it may give someone a reason, a sense to not fear it, to not think it's a terrible bad thing, but to think like, well, isn't it kind of a nice thought that we're going to finally be at rest from all of it, finally be at peace. I mean, he's finally at peace. I've just gone the long way around the barn and end up saying a sentence that everybody says. That's the first thing every nurse, every doctor, every priest would say at that moment, he's at peace. Which means perhaps everybody, the vast majority of people who reach middle age, know all this stuff I'm talking about. And it's just so common knowledge that they don't bother talking about it, and that perhaps at the end of the day, I'm the idiot juvenile slow coach. That's just ego, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether I am or not. Everything's got its own pace. Everything grows at a different speed. And I've always liked the juvenile tag. I've always been proud of someone saying he's just like a child. And as I get older, I think more so. He never grew up. You're damn right. I guess in that book, if it could be written, it'd be just, the reason for it would be just one thing. It'd be that you'd write passages that would just lift the spirit in someone a little bit. That's all. They may not understand what exactly you're trying to say, but just like in the sense of Nietzsche, when he was high and when he was writing about a super affirmative thing, even if you didn't quite understand what he was on about specifically, you couldn't help but be taken upward by the way he used the language, by some of the images and stuff. It's not exactly poetry, because poetry just never really worked for me. I never really got much of a lift out of poetry. Now that might just be the case because poetry is incredibly maybe a personal thing, and it's almost impossible to find the correct fit in poetry. If I found somebody with a similar kind of thinking psyche to me, and I was able to kind of get their poetry, it maybe have a phenomenally strong effect on me. Maybe as I get older and I'm having more of these kind of difficult discussions with myself, maybe eventually poetry will be the only thing that makes sense. That's a kind of paradox. Maybe the poetry will be the only thing that makes more sense than the prose, because you realize it's just all about spirit and feeling, and that there isn't really any, like I said, maybe there is no ultimate solution, or maybe there is no cure to the condition. There is just a heightening of the senses. There is just a shedding of one skin and a growing. So although there's no cure, the man becomes greater and greater. Becomes a wonderful is able to look at himself in a new way, is able to analyze himself in a new way, is able to feel in a new way, be anxious in a new way. Maybe the anxiety turns more to something more positive, because when you have the anxiety, you know, there's some new wonderful thoughts coming through, there's some new realizations, you're working your way up to a higher plateau, and this is the process. Some people might think this is all nonsense. My mother would say, you shouldn't think like that, you should just watch a movie. I think it's useful though. It's not obsessive thinking like I can have. And it does feel that there's some purpose to it, and that there's some reward in it, there's some higher state to be gained in it. It doesn't feel like idle, useless thinking. I have enough of the useless stuff. Fucking hell, it's like the last few nights. You know, trying to go to sleep and then finding yourself almost in tears with a kind of desperation or a shame and about let's say the wedding 15 fucking years ago. Lying in bed with tears in your eyes because you just can't stop going over this event and that event, and how you put your mother and your aunts through it. I think that must have been a pretty horrible situation. You know, even thinking about now, I could easily slip into it. That's seductive, you get caught in that. Now there may be a place to say I'm sorry to your parents, but to your mother, I know. She'd just say, don't be silly. But at the end of the day, it is such a crime against yourself, because it serves no purpose. I mean, the thinking I've been doing for the last hour or whatever in this walk does serve a purpose. It's trying to kind of grapple with certain things, and it's trying to get myself to a higher position. It's looking at important stuff, but that dwelling on something 15 years ago that can't be changed is just, it is a form of mental illness, no doubt. Bonjour. I said bonjour, you stupid bitch. Don't just smile at me, say bonjour. I shall run after you and drag you off your bike and rape you in front of your son. See, that's the shadow coming out. That's the shadow. I was thinking of that yesterday. I was thinking, my God, the things that everybody, and I'm capable of. It's quite shocking. The reason people like watching serial killers is because they've all got the ability in them to do just that. And there's part of them, never admit it, but there's part of them is like, God, I'd love to experience what it's like to be driving in a car and there's this beautiful teenage girl hitchhiking, and I take her in the car and she's wearing a little shorts, blonde hair, blue eyes, and a little tank top, and I think, God, I would love to tie her up and myself, I'm not sure I could handle anyone in fear like that. I don't think it would get me off, to be honest. I don't think it would, but the thought is there. I mean, in everybody, I think. Maybe a second, just for a second, someone cycling by you on a bike, and from nowhere the thought comes, just run out in front and just shoulder that person, knock them off their bike. I mean, why do we like all those movies? Why did those guys laugh when the bad guy in the movie splits some old woman's head open with a rock? It's crazy. I mean, the shadow is an amazing... The fact that in us we're all capable of these things. I think that's why we like watching programs about them. Imagine this or that. Luckily, the good side wins out. Luckily, in the sense of entity and the knowledge of what that fear would be like if someone that wins out. Because I know what it's like, and I think, oh my God, I would never want to be responsible for putting anybody in that state of fear. Even for a moment, it would be terrible. I don't want to live with that. Which brings to mind a few things from my past, which I guess will never really go away either. Scaring a couple of kids when I was very young in Carlow. This and that. But to say that we're all saints, no one's got the dark side. It's there. It's always there in a thought or two. Luckily, it stays there. Nearly everybody is good at heart. A lot of people led astray, maybe. But I think the natural state of man is one of kind of goodness. Anyway, I haven't gone to the river. Maybe we'll go later. I'm going to go in. And I think I'm going to go and play some games. I normally don't like being on the computer in the afternoon, but fuck, I don't know what else to do. Me and Flo are both a bit bored today. A day like this, you see, if you had to go to the Connemara for a few hours, and if you were busy, you didn't leave till 3 in the afternoon, the whole makeup of the day would be different. It's like if I came back from the Connemara and we get back at 11 in the evening. It's such a pleasure to spend some time in the computer room. You didn't see me, but you knew it was me, did you? You didn't bark, Tuco. You didn't see me, but you didn't bark. Hey! Flo's painting. Oh! Hello, little fella. Hello, little fella. That's my boy. Okay, so that...
warm, no?
Yeah, very warm. I guess that's the end of this broadcast. No, I don't know. 50 minutes. That I was gone for 50 minutes.